This nibble originally aired on RSBANDB Update, episode 879, Sudi Economics. Enjoy. Have you guys ever heard of something called SuityBot?
Not until you told me.
In our RSBANDB Discord server?
It is in the RSBANDB Discord server. It is.
Did you like that plug?
I did. rsbnb.com/discord. That's the one extra bit I'll add on to it. So, for those unaware, SuityBot provides a range of services to the RuneScape community, but what it has become most known for over time is being used as a tool to price check items that might be on the Grand Exchange, but might have an erroneous Grand Exchange value in that you don't know how much they're actually going for. Or it's also used to track items that are worth more than the actual Grand Exchange value is able to track, because, we have such items in the game like the Staff of Armadillo and various rares like the party hats and the Santa hats that are worth more than 2.1 bill. So with that's what one of the things that SuityBot was used for. Now, the bot was shut down earlier in the week because of a backlash that the community hoist onto the folks who make SuityBot, which is really unfortunate. I'm going to start by reading the statement from Sudi themselves. So, the intent of the price-checking module has failed to meet the desired result, and for that I apologize. What started out as a great tool has become something I hate working on. I tried to implement numerous measures to combat price manipulation, but every measure dissuades regular players, who this tool was built for, from contributing their prices. It seems that merchers and those with malicious intent will jump through all of the measures I throw at them, even during the time where only video recorded submissions were allowed, resulting in no regular player bothering to submit a price. I do appreciate all the love and kind words everybody has sent, but I do not see myself continuing unless something drastic is implemented. And this was resulting in the entire bot being shut down on midweek this week. But since then, it's been brought back with some Grand Exchange functionality, which I'll talk about right now in an addendum to the statement. So the statement continues, as per my previous announcement, the price-checking module was disabled while acceptable measures were considered. After extensive discussion with many players in the suggestion channel, it seems that the overwhelming response is to enable price-checking for items in the Grand Exchange only, while potential solutions for items above max cash are brainstormed. At this stage, I am still uncertain whether an acceptable solution exists for items above max cash. And this was a statement written by Sudi that was put out to the Price Check Discord. Okay, so let's separate this out into two things then. Price checking done on items below 2.1 bill, and price checking done on items above 2.1 bill. Now, the problem is that rare items recently have shot upwards in value over the last month or so, to the point where certain items have gained 20 billion plus worth in value, seemingly out of nowhere. And with this, parts of the community took this price increase out on the creators of SuityBot, which many people use for the checking of these rare items, rather than directing their anger at the root of the problem with this. And, we've run community-run features here before at RSBANDB. And every time we do something to that, and even this podcast falls into that category, we're doing this as a service to the community because we like the game we play. And from a community management perspective, it's never nice to see when vast swaths of the community are targeting their anger at one specific community person in general. That really does take all the fun out of it. So I highly empathize with Sudi on this.
Well, it doesn't help that they're completely wrong on top of it.
What do you mean?
When you grab your pitchfork and your torch, you better damn sure make you get to the right house.
To the right target. Yeah. And I have an idea of where this is going with this, but I know you said something, Earth. Did you want to jump in on that, or do you want me to continue on to the next part?
I'll let you continue with the exposition here.
So the bigger problem is that the prices on these rare items in question and expensive items in general have gone up either through inflation or price manipulation. Measuring inflation can be done on a market whole by looking at the common items on the GE that are trackable, but for items that are not trackable or have mismarked GE values or are manipulated, this would create a false measure of inflation. And the best measure of tracking inflation and determining if these rare items are being manipulated is through a data analytics side, measuring GP that changes hands, spirit shards, and items that are traded, then making an assertion based on that. But us as community members and players, we don't have access to that. So a question on that side of the equation would have to come down to Jagex. That being said, Sudi did clarify in postings made in their official Discord that there were multiple private messages received from merchanters claiming victory and looking forward to manipulating prices going forward. People sent messages in thanks for that. And this confirms that a whole... After shutting it down. And this confirms that a lot of the price movements we see at higher tiers of the economy could potentially be caused by a group or a cabal controlling prices of the rare item market. And when you split this all out, this is an issue that should really be addressed by Jagex. In particular, the question needs to be asked is whether or not the game's economy should allow for this kind of control and price manipulation by such a huge sector if it's indeed happening. And I think that's where we leave the analysis and start debating reality.
Well, I mean, isn't that like asking, does OPEC manipulate the price of oil?
Yes, that was the comparison I was
well, whenever you're talking about a cartel, right?
Uh-huh. What it sounds like to me.
And there was this big thought with Elder God Wars and the influx of people PVMing and all the salvage and such coming into the game over the last year or so since we started with Rex Matriarchs and then moved through the four fronts. There was thought that there was just a natural increase going forward with the amount of GP coming in terms of salvage then being alked and then adding that GP to the economy. Because let's be real here, you can go to somewhere like Karapak or even the Archglacier and get tons and tons of Orichalcum salvage that alks for millions of GP out of a single Reaper task. So
I can go to the Abyssal Demons and sit there for 20 minutes and I look at my coin pouch and I've got 1 mil or 2 mil.
Yeah,
and I don't know why.
Well, it's Spring Cleaner and Gold Accumulator.
No, I know why, but
okay, fair.
It was.
I get it. And this raises a question: is that, and we don't have an answer on this, and this is something that I think we need an answer from on Jagex, on their part. Are the price increases we've seen over the last year due to inflation and just the way the economy is going? Or are there people on the high end in the rare market pushing those up, which is bringing everything else up with it throughout the rest of the economy?
Well, but it's not separated out like that. Like what Earth is saying, that's true, but that doesn't mean that the rare market isn't being manipulated. That doesn't mean that, like, so say there was a certain percentage of inflation when it comes to the money coming in. It's a much higher percentage, I'm betting, that they've raised the price of rares because that's a cartel manipulating prices.
Yeah. I mean, the price of rares does not affect the overwhelming majority of players.
No, it doesn't. But it can have rippling effects when it comes to in terms of how much people are willing to sell things for to try and push towards those rares. Because if you talk to, people who do the 24-49 streaks at Telos and such, and other forms of high octane PVM, they're doing that in order to try and push and chase into that rare market. At least that's some of the things that I've heard, that sometimes that's what people do. So I'm thinking it could have an impact on that. But at the end of the day, when you start spilling all this out, there needs to be a question of how much of this is GP coming into the game and how much of it is price manipulation. And if it's a majority price manipulation, is Jagex okay with that? Is that what they want in the economy?
So, what makes you think that there's inflation in any other part of the market except for rares?
I don't have an answer as to whether or not inflation exists in the current RS economy. I don't have the data to
because I'm not super convinced on that. I mean,
like I said, I don't have the data to track that. I mean, we would need more trade volumes than we're given on the GE.
Yeah, but you take a look at the staples. You build the what's it called?
You build a price index.
Yeah, the price basket.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at stuff like food, Rocktails are like 2K, 2.4K each. That's what it's been for a while. Sharks, somehow, after 20 years, are still 1K each. And I mean, rune prices have changed, but you can blame that on, like, Animate Dead and
Magic Meta.
All of that. So soul runes and a couple of the elemental runes have shot up, but I mean, that's because of an increase in demand, not a decrease in the value of an individual gold piece.
Right,
the buying power.
Right, and in general, you can still get inflation through increases in demand with that, and then that can ripple on through the GP side of things. But
well, but isn't that just but that's just a price raise, right? That,
it is.
That literally is supply and demand. That's not inflation.
It is over time. If the price went up and if it used to be 100 GP and now it's 290 GP.
But if there's 200 more people that want that item, it's not.
That's not
like it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
That's still inflation, though. At the end of the day, one of the ways you can measure inflation is by the amount of demand that a specific basket of items or a specific item is being pulled on. And if it's being pulled on more, the price is
entirely disingenuous to claim that that's the same, though. Because a new use for the item has been discovered. It's trying to think of a good comparison here.
I mean, it added more intrinsic value to it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's entirely true. But
maybe
all inflation is at the end of the day a measurement between X and Y of how much something has gone up. So you can still technically have inflation even if the demand has added new uses that cause that price to go up. What you're probably thinking of is the idea behind GP inflation of just adding certain amounts of GP to the economy, which, as we said, is a question that can't be answered. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, the supply and demand questions of the push and pull of the economy does have an impact on everything that is involved in the prices that do eventually go up or down in some cases.
Well, I think you just said something that's important, because I think in general, when you hear the word inflation, you think of it as a money,
exactly.
a GP issue, right? I don't think most people would even think about it as a basket of goods.
Exactly,
like that.
And that's the important thing that when I hear inflation, that I think about it. It's not just necessarily a monetary problem with the amount of GP. It's a question of what's happening with the economy and certain groups of items as a whole. And they can be influenced by supply and demand. And once again, this is highlighting a very complicated topic that cannot necessarily easily be distilled. And I know last time Timbo was on stream, which has been a long time ago, they need to have another live stream with him. Those are always fun. But when Timbo was last on, he said that he was actually working with economists that they had hired to look into the economy and figure out what was happening on this. But as with everything in terms of how all this goes, they're not actually able to say anything until they're ready to act because it could potentially have side effects.
Salwans.
Right? And that's exactly it. And
I really do think that the increase in the price of rares is purely manipulation.
yeah, I'm willing to, if I had to put a guess out, I would say that that's purely manipulation. As for the price of combat supplies like runes, fish, armor, equipment, and whatnot, the bulk of it, I would say, comes down to just increased demand with the Elder God War stuff. And the new uses
And
for it.
PVM in general, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's pretty arguable that is the dominant thing.
So I'm looking at the price for Rocktail on RSBANDB's Grand Exchange portfolio, and it has the price history for the last 4,597 days. So on release, Rocktails in 2009 were 1,789, and they leveled out. I mean, averaging over a while, scrolling through here, up and down, but about 2K. And then for about a year, they spiked up to a max of 6,000 each. That was right after the pandemic hit. So I'm wondering. So that's another side interesting study: the effects of the pandemic on the RuneScape economy. But all of that All of that is to say, right now the price of a Rocktail is 2,059 GP. So 13 years later, it's still the same price.
Vastly better than the real world.
Yeah. And I mean, let's look at.
Oh, I know why
random items.
I know why the Rocktail started spiking in early 2020.
Sharks did the same thing.
Oh, Sharks did the same thing.
Up to 3,000.
Okay.
Yeah, Sharks are still about 1K each.
Power Burst of Vitality came out at the tail end of 2019, and those use Rocktail. But if Sharks are doing the same thing, then you have to expand the field on that. And the only things that drop Rocktail in meaningful numbers are Araxi, Nex AOD, and the QBD.
Yeah.
That's an interesting side effect, and this is a good example. I'm glad you brought that up, because when you start splitting all this out, it really just shows that you can't just look at one aspect of it. You got to take the whole of economy approach with this, and we can look and we can see that Rocktail spiked up. But you said Sharks also did something similar. So pointing it just to the Power Burst of Vitality would be a bad thing to say. So in essence, then there's something else happening.
Is if anyone is in like an MBA program somewhere and they need an idea for their master's thesis in economics,
the RuneScape economy?
I got a great idea for you.
The RuneScape economy.
Seek me out.
I would love to do something like that.
I don't think we can adequately cover it in anything less than a doctoral thesis. But it's a very complex issue that, we can spitball it here, but...
Exactly. And you touched on the key point with that, is that there's so many people who will say it's X, Y, or Z, right?
I don't know many people who would say X, Y, and Z, maybe.
Okay. But when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to dive into this, like you said, without a boatload of analysis or more information, which we don't have.
And I mean, there's just so much missing here.
And that kind of leads me to... Go ahead.
If you had the like amount of goods traded and all of that, then you would have a better
that would be really interesting, wouldn't it?
A better picture for it. But
yeah,
I mean, here we could just look at it and be like, it's probably price manipulation. But that's just me knowing human nature and
understanding basic
RS.
economics.
Not even that, just understanding human nature.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it underscores what I thought the upshot was going to be coming out of this entire thing, that the economy is a complicated matter, and a lot of players who I have talked to claim to have the answers, but we really can't give these answers without having access to all that internal data of the trades that are processed, how many rares are changing hands, how many spirit shards are changing hands. We can guesstimate, of course, about inflation and whether or not it exists in GP or whether it's a wider economic problem. But the big question is about this whole Sudi business is if the rares are being manipulated. And I just need to underscore at the end of the day, the community should not take out its anger at those making what has become a valuable service.
Well, it's like getting mad at a calculator because you don't like what the arithmetic was.
I know plenty of people who got mad at calculators.
I mean, it's like, huh? I mean, go ahead.
And I don't know the full. I've seen some people who have blamed Sweetie for all of this. Even if they didn't handle it well, it's still not exactly their fault because there was one tool for this. There's one source of information, and of course that's going to be manipulated. And there's not really any way around that. I think it was bound to happen.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's much that they could have done to prevent it.
Yeah, and there's another one.
Much as people say, "Oh, you could have just done this and it would be better."
No, this is an economy
more complex like that.
This is an economy that they are monitoring, and they couldn't prevent any of this when you think about it. There's another one that tracks the rare items above max cash. ely.gg is still in use. I don't know if they're experiencing a similar outrage over this, but I know a number of people that I talked to who are in that rare market did move their price checking and such over to ely.gg for that. So,
you have one source of information. It's a little troubling.
Yeah, exactly. So,
well, and this is a good time to manipulate the market because there are other things. There's so many other things that they could try blaming it on. I mean, one is that general sense that inflation's happened anyway, but then two,
and you have to wonder with that, maybe they perpetrated that idea that inflation was happening to hide what they were doing with the rare market, because to the run-of-the-mill player, they're not going to see that as any different.
Yeah. And then they can also say, well, there's increased demand for rares because we got rid of the dual arena.
From PVM.
Well, but got rid of the dual arena. That's where the big players played. You can't gamble down there anymore, but you can gamble in the market. That's still perfectly acceptable. So, I mean, there's all kinds of smoke screens.
Yeah.
It's the perfect time.
Yeah.
If you were going to do it.
You can find full episodes of RSBANDB Update right here on this YouTube channel. If you found this video useful or just enjoyed it, like and subscribe or leave a comment.